Starting for the 4:30 regular meeting of the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union Policy Drafting Committee. I'll go through the agenda and then we'll have acknowledgements of who's here, and then we'll proceed from that. Today, our meeting is being offered by way of Zoom and in presence. We prefer that you attend in person if possible. Just seeing it provides a more active conversation with each other and trying to electronically go back and forth. The agenda for today, we have public comments. It's from our meeting in January 8th. On the agenda, we have the Act 5120, concussion management. That's item 3, 4, 6100, library material selection. That's a new one for the day. Desk code 5080 is back for final, and 4001 harassment of employees is on for the review. And we have a 4003 bullying prevention of adults, FYI 5100 screening, and B 5185 anaphylaxis, administrative regs for both of those, the tracking sheet, and then we have for future considerations 5175 possession, sale, and distribution use of illegal substance, 4100 alcohol and drug-free workplace, 6230 curriculum-based field trips, and 5156 student nutrition and wellness policy. And a proposed meeting for the next meeting is January 6th. So if there are any...
May 6th.
I mean, May 6th.
Not going to get a lot done.
Are there any rearrangements or any additions or changes that need to be to the agenda as prepared or read? That's both here and on Zoom. Here none. Then I'd like to just quickly say who's here. So I'll start. Let's start at the end here.
Sandy Foster, Pound.
Leon Johnson, North Bennington.
Glenn Thurber, Woodford. John Mount Anthony.
Laura Boudreaux, Assistant Superintendent. Lisa Poplaski, Administrative Assistant to Laura Boudreaux.
Edie Aiken, MAU.
Jim Colkey, SVSU Superintendent.
Dina Atwood, Legal Counsel for the districts.
Hey, well, thank everyone here. Hope everybody had a good Easter. We'll get right to work here. The protocol for this is when we get to we want to hear and listen to everybody for clarifications, all of the policies and so forth. To keep in mind that what we're having to do with the policy piece is to make it general, globally enough so that it would be giving directions for procedures to be written and prepared to follow them. So Dina is here to be able to help us out with any legal questions that may be coming up for a couple of the policies. At this time, I would like to ask, are there any public comments? Hearing and seeing none. The next thing is minutes from January 8th. I'd like to have a motion to accept the minutes as read or prepared for January 8th. Okay. You don't have to have a second. It's small enough there. All in favor of the minutes as, if there's a discussion. All in favor, just aye. Please raise your hand either one. Okay.
Aye.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Actually, quick clarifier. Am I okay to join in with that aye? Because I wasn't part of the committee at that point.
You're just reading it, and if you don't have any problem,
nope, I don't have any problem.
Okay. So that's the clarification.
Just want to be sure.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Policy 5120, concussion management. This particular policy went out and went around to the different boards and it's back. And we're still for a final goal to discuss everything about it. That we may have some concerns with the policy. The direction this policy came in was that we've always had things in that works for students that participate in extracurricular activities, the sports, but we didn't have consideration for all of it. The kids in the classroom and so forth along that line. So all of that was added into this particular policy to make sure all students are looked after and followed according to the laws and regulations associated with a concussion. So at this particular time, I'd like to just open it up. If we had anything else, we had some discussion at the last meeting, and we had another meeting and so forth, and I think we captured just about everything to happen, but we'll open it up right now for some discussion. Do we have any discussions pertaining to the material in this policy for clarity?
For clarity, who in the school is the authorized person? In every school, who is that person that is authorized to determine whether there's a concussion?
The question was, who in the school is authorized to determine whether there's a concussion or not? And so that was the question that was going around when I started the high school. The high school, you have coaches that look after kids that participate in sports. They're trained to be able to say somebody got hit hard and asked a few questions. We have a physician, not a physician, so we have a trainer, athletic trainer on site when there is not, at the big events. If not, they have the coaches. You also have, if they're participating not in a practice, but in an active contest, you have all of the officials that are responsible for noticing that something happened and sending the child out. So all we're doing at that particular time is that at that level for an athlete is sending them out. Now you got the classroom participation that's not competing in the sport. You got the instructor that participates that's in the classroom or that's over those that would say something happened here and this person is acting out of the norm. They would then be sent to the nurse, if the school nurse is there, or they would have a licensed practice person at the high school or whatever will be seeing and saying the person need to go further out to get medical treatment or get to see a medical doctor, registered medical doctor outside that area. If we go on from the high school and the middle school downward, then you get into the other areas. You have a nurse at each one of the area schools that is responsible for saying that somebody came, something happened on the playground. The first persons will be the teacher in that area that says, well, we were running and playing and such a person failed, ran into a tree and so forth, and they don't appear to be themselves or coherent. That's a sign of symptoms of a concussion. They go to the nurse, or they get, if there's no nurse, then you got to call a parent to make sure that they get taken out and reviewed by a medical licensed person to determine whether something has happened to them or not. So
yeah, that's Ashley Walker, who's our lead nurse. That's the nurses are developing that in the admin regs. We shared that had come up on the last conversation. Right. So I passed it on to that group, and that's where they said it's going to be, is in the admin regs.
Okay, so that's clear, the different clarifications will be that to really name those people, but in this policy here, we identify, the groups that will be in the area that should know those things. And then you have to learn to return, return to school and, whether you can play again. And so we have a set of protocols that once a person has been determined to have had a concussion, they go on a reduced learning schedule to make sure that they can work their way back up to a full, to be able to manage a full class before they can be released, participate in a normal manner. And to play, the same thing. They have to first go into a reduced schedule and then work their way back out and determine whether they can go and
So is this, I just have a quick question. Is this is all determined by their primary physician after their evaluation?
at the elementary level? Once they go into a concussion protocol, you have the primary physician that they have, and you have the nurse at the school to just get the information, because the information's got to come from somewhere. At the elementary level, they have to, once, if they go out, they need to go and see a medical person outside of the school.
Right. So what happens if for some reason they're unable to get into their primary for a certain amount of time? Because I know a lot of especially the pediatricians are backlogged.
I don't know that, the question is, what happens if a person ran into a tree? Well, I just say a tree, a fail and incoherent or something along that line. And they have to go out.
Right.
Along that line. So the nurse is going to say, wait a minute, we have to go out, and the person has to go. If they can't get to their emergency state, then they go to the emergency room. What else is up there at the hospital that they can go to?
Oh, urgent care.
Yeah.
Urgent care.
Urgent care, if something in an emergency comes up.
So
It's not that they have to schedule, I don't know, schedule an appointment and say, I gotta wait 2 or 3 weeks. This doesn't allow for that. And it shouldn't be that. If something actually is no different than being in a car accident, if somebody get in an accident for a car and they go to the emergency room.
So back to my line 6 and 7, the question for me, that I don't have your background in athleticism or your training for being a official on the field, but I don't see how we're providing context and clarity on having a concussion, which is what we're sharing that we're going to do in this policy.
Anything else is going to happen in administrative grade.
But then it shouldn't say that this policy is going to provide it if we're not going to provide it in the policy, is I think where I'm thinking about this.
I think the policy provides content and clarity for our students. And that's what the policy is going to do. Now, every one of the things that need to happen it needs to be more than identifying concussion, just the wording and saying, the policy says it's going to identify that. Well, now we got to have some of the things that are procedures and administrative regs to say, well, how do I identify that? Well, you usually ask the person, these are things you ask the person, are you, if the person look dazed, there's something that they start to throw up, they don't know where they are, they go to the wrong side of the room, or they do something. Those things won't be in this policy.
Sure.
Not here.
But we're sharing that they are, though, that we're going to provide context and clarity for students and school personnel to identify concussion. Let's say I have, and I don't, no training at all. and you're able to share with me what I could be looking for, and that's lovely.
It's called,
What I'm wondering is, do we just need to?
Is the wording,
Does it need to reflect what we're actually sharing? And that is that you need to get medical attention if there's a possibility of having a concussion.
that would be, in the administrative regs part, in terms of that, because if you tell everybody in the policy and someone here says, and that goes along with the signs and symptoms of a concussion and determine it, the first thing that needs to happen is these people identifying what they believe to be a concussion, and they need to be going out to get the treatment. And that part of the treatment under that category, I think, needs to be in administrative regs and not here.
So-
And if you want to change the language to what besides identifying concussions and managing students, well, that's the next thing out here. Return to learn. What are we going to add in there? Who's going to manage the students for return to learn? And the next question we will be asking here. In the case of identifying athletes, return to play. Starting to name different, at the elementary level, say, well, a person can't go out in the playground to play. Who's going to say to them, you can't go out there? It's what you mean. What we're getting to, well, that's going to depend on when that happened. They're going to be going out for the emergency care review. They're going to come back through to the nurse in the hospital, in the school system that says, well, we got to release the person back because they've gone through a set of protocols associated with a concussion.
Sure, I agree with you 100%, but I think that in the wording that we're saying that we're identifying a concussion, and I'm not sure that we are, is what I think that is, that if we could.
So how would you write, how would that sentence to be if you?
I would drop this preliminarily identifying concussions, referring to appropriate licensed medical care, and that the appropriate licensed medical care then manages the student's return to learn, and in the case of student athletes, return to play. By adding a couple of words, we're taking the onus off of us, putting it on a licensed professional, and bringing back a protocol by which a child returns to learn or play.
So what line do you want, Glenn, that you?
Yeah.
I was, now that you said it, we want you to remember it, and we want you to put it in the line. I would put it as in line 8, following concussions, by licensed, sent out to and for by licensed medical care facility, be it emergency room.
Wait,
Well, that's what we don't want to get into the nitty gritty. That's the stuff that's going to be in the administrative regs. And so we're now dictating that, and we're making ourselves allowable by when we say go into the emergency room. They may not.
But we're also liable if we're saying that we're going to have context and clarity and we don't.
How are we allowable?
Well, because
What if we're identifying?
concussions, it says here, we can identify them.
And anybody can identify something wrong with somebody and say that hey, they need to go somewhere. And that's what that is. It's not specifically saying that you got to be medically. I use the example of somebody running into a wall, and if you were to turn around to me and start looking for it, I said, hey, something happened. We need to get him to some care.
But
Don't need to be licensed.
Let's say in a playground instance that there wasn't an adult who saw that happen, and you can't identify.
Then how would you know?
That's my point.
You won't know. Then the next person or the next whoever is responsible for that child is to report. My child was playing today, and they came home and they're not themselves. Well, the parent now is starting to say something that, you know, I'm going to send a person to the emergency room because they're going to ask the question along that line. And that's where that's going to go. That's not going to say that the school is responsible. Say, well, if something happened and you didn't see it or know it, at some point in time, if a person is incoherent when it comes to their behavior normal, someone is going to ring the alarm that they needed to be examined because they realize that they're not what they used, not a normal self.
So earlier you shared that that perhaps if we maybe added identifying signs and symptoms of concussions, but then we're not actually identifying, because I'm not a medical person, so I'm not sure that, but we're creating a policy that states that. So in that identifying signs and symptoms, that could possibly follow in the admin regs, that the nurses could create something as a guideline for when nurses aren't there, or if someone else has to make a decision in their place.
So if we said identifying signs and symptoms of a concussion, okay. I'm just trying to put that in the context of what happened if they don't have a concussion. See, because
we're only identifying symptoms and signs. I want to take off the medical piece that says that I know that I can identify a concussion. I'm not sure I would ever be able to know that I would ever have that medical.
it may be we can get away with identifying signs and symptoms of a concussion in that particular part of the document. And that would be
possible signs of other concussion.
Yeah, identifying. Well, the wording in the text for the BPA, for the National Association for Athletes and everything, is signs and symptoms of a concussion. That's exactly what's there.
So
But
let's
it's
add it.
still, you know, I guess Dina, if you could weigh in on this, you know, words matter. One word said, you know, if we put the possibility in there, we have plausible deniability that we're not medical professionals.
That's not what that's saying. That's not what that's saying. That's saying that you identifying signs and symptoms of a concussion. That's why I really didn't want. I mean, we can put that in there, but to change it because everybody is thinking ownership for liability, and that's not what this is saying. There's no ownership or liability for that besides as it defined in the job titles for all those people that are directly related to the professions, and they have that covered, like the nurse, the doctors, and all those.
In line 6, we say that it is. That's why this policy provides context and clarity. It's those words that make me think that signs and symptoms are better than saying I'm going to actually identify concussion.
We can put signs and symptoms in there, and
Possibly, because we don't know for sure, and that kind of.
well, you don't need to know for sure. That's what I'm trying to make sure. I mean, I'm saying the board don't need to know. It's just that we're telling the people that they need to identify signs and symptoms. Is what it's saying here, signs and symptoms of a concussion. Now, I can get away from that. I mean, I can live with that, but that's not. I mean, the policy, if it makes it clear for everybody, we can do that. If everybody think they feel better by saying that, that's what's going to happen right here. But and read it and make it flow for them, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Exactly.
Thank you.
So we can consider that one done?
Yes, I think so. We can, if this is already added it in. Are there any other comments for this particular policy?
Yeah, there was. When we get to the definitions, we have the definition of a concussion, And then is this next line one definition is a licensed healthcare professional? Is that what that is part of the definitions?
Is, where are you? Line.
The second page.
Second page.
Done.
Oh, sorry.
Recognition and response to a concussion can prevent further injury and help with recovery.
So, yeah, so we have the definition here, and then we have concussions, and then we have the bottom of this is 33. When you get to the top, this licensed healthcare professional, is that part of the definitions?
Under licensed health care professional, it defines what they are. It's not saying that it's and it does tell you, that's the definition that tell you who those people are defined, like licensed.
Yep.
That's what that does.
Okay, so athletic trainers are okay they are able to define and identify concussions as well?
And me too, and you too. But
Okay.
yes,
Well,
yes, in the school system, they're licensed, see, and the word here is licensed. And it's saying licensed now. I'm not a licensed person to do that, but and that's what all I'm gonna do is those symptoms over there that you're talking about. I'm gonna say to somebody, this person here is actually somewhere out of norm. But yes, these are the licensed people named title, pertinent to Title 26 to be able to do that.
And RNs are not licensed too? I'm truly asking, I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying here, the licensed professionals include as a medical doctor, advanced practice RNs. And when you say that, you say, well, what about a license? You still got a RN and a licensed registered nurse.
We didn't list them, that's why I was.
No, and so if you need to go further and in terms of who you say you want to have out here, you won't be trying to get anything. I don't pull up 26 and so forth and say, at what level do we have it's saying registered. And so, and whether they are licensed registered nurse is the same as a registered nurse, but it's not as what was the next level down in the nurses? Healthcare.
You would go APRN, RN, LPN.
Yeah. And so the LPNs
The LPN wouldn't,
is not in here.
no,
And so
but neither is a regular RN, and that's what's next.
that's right. And I'm saying the RN versus licensed RN, it's,
They're licensed, aren't they? Registered nurse?
yeah.
Okay. So should we add them, is my question.
I'm just trying to see whether this definition came specifically for, it's more than,
Yeah,
these definitions came.
from the Title 26. So the nurses put this list together using Title 26.
Right,
But they
That's
didn't
my
include
memory of
themselves.
that.
So they didn't include themselves.
but they include, even though they got Title
Says this
26
may
in here.
include an athetic trainer or other healthcare provider licensed pursuant to Title 26. So I think the language, again, I also don't have the language right in front of me. I do know that when this question was asked before, the nurses referenced Title 26 and that they were going to get more specific in relationship to because all of our schools are culturally different and the staffing is very different in each school, that they would get more specific in the admin regs.
So we can ask that question so the nurses, when they go back through, is there any other positions or personnel for the administrative regs that they would like to include with this for their responsibility of being able to release a person? This deals with the release of them back to somebody else, not just saying, there. So whether those people have that responsibility in their title, I don't know.
And then
So,
the only other thing I would ask is to share when those admin procedures will be completed. Should this be warned or if this adopted, at what length of time should we anticipate seeing the admin regs?
to answer that question truthfully, and and to be, we use the term, that in a reasonable amount of time, and that keep popping up, that administrators have to prepare that, and somebody's out there working and looking at it, and we can't put a date or time limit on that, knowing that it's in the works. And that's what our job is right now, is to say, okay, we got a policy, we put the policy in place, and the owners with the administrators and the group prepare the administrative regs, bring it back and say, I got it attached. Now, it may take them more than, depending on what on their docket and what's on their plate, to be able to months, 2 months or somewhere. I can't do that. We shouldn't be even going in that direction.
Well, I only asked because I just wanted to have some type of timeline to,
I
do you think a year? Do you think that would be within?
We still.
They have regular meetings and this was one of their goals this year. So I feel that they're waiting for this piece to happen so that they can finalize their administrative recommendations. They are very much on top of their practice and report, so.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to the board, doesn't it? The admin regs.
The admin regs,
There's
the
a policy.
FYI for the board to look at, and we'll be able to see some of those here today.
Okay.
So to sort of drill that down a little bit, they're gonna go out, they're gonna fine tune this, and then it's gonna come back for final approval. So we don't need to look to add the fine tune language here now.
No, you do not.
Just
An administrative regs is not the responsibility of this policy group here.
That
We
helps.
well, I keep saying that everybody wants it. I'm saying that the broad brush is the policy of the board that we have. We put the title in there, and all of the interpretation and management of that is to be done with an administrative reg. That's, and that administrative regs reflect what the policy is. And that's hard for everybody, because everybody I want you to tell me this, I want you to do this. That's not what this is all about in terms of the policy.
So that helps.
But I would like to be able to say that we'll start next year, the school year, knowing what those regs are.
I would like to not go in that direction with that. And I'm trying to make sure, I'm trying to be as clear as possible, that we cannot tie the hands of the administrators and so for that. Our job is to put the policy in place and ask that they move as quickly as they possible within a reasonable amount of time. I think the word is that we say. Dana has a question there.
Actually, I don't have a question. I think, Sandy, part of understand, the nurses are very focused. I think Laura mentioned they sort of have their agenda of things that they know that they want to have addressed. They run it by me as well at the admin reg level, so there is that oversight from a legal perspective. So I think rationally that they know that this is something that needs to be done, and it's something that they're looking to have done in the sooner rather than the later. I don't, and they understand the importance of it, and I think that they have prioritized it. I think it's more along the lines of giving them the time to actually have their meeting, sit it down, and hash out where they think it goes. So I agree with Leon on that. While the board doesn't, while the board gets an FYI for admin regs, typically Laura and Jim run new ones by me to just take a look at it, and your nurses tend to ask very good questions of me as well. And I think one of them is also going to be what we're referring to about the Title 26, because Title 26 in terms of professions and occupations lists a whole host of professions and occupations, and I suspect when I go and talk to the nurses, it's because it covers also LPNs, and I think they had a question that needed clarification of whether or not LPNs can actually be trained in doing this, or if it's just the APRNs as opposed to also RNs and LPNs. So I think that's also why that's there. That's why I just wanted to pop in on that. But Sandy, I would not expect that this is going to be being bashed about in terms of admin regs a year from now. I would expect that it would be done prior to that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Well, with that in mind, this concussion policy with the adjustment that we made in here should continue on because it didn't change the intent in what we want to have for this policy. It's going to continue to flow on. Is that everybody's in agreement? Okay. The next policy on the agenda, the schedule, is a new one that we hadn't talked about. And that's policy number 6100, library medium. And it's a timely piece because we wanted to make sure that the schools prepare themselves. There's been a lot of different talk about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. That's been there for years in terms of the library, but this is a good time to let everybody know what it is and how we manage the library. Let's go, Laura.
Yeah, could I just add one piece? This is a group that meets, and this is in a list of many policies that were reviewed by these working groups last summer. So the media specialists are recommending these changes to this particular policy, and they were using the American Library Association as their reference.
Right.
I wanted to share that on their behalf.
Thank you.
They wanted to pass that on to all of you.
All right, and I think they did a good job editing things in there for us in terms of what's in here. Yeah, the policy showed what we changed. The headline was changed because this is one to update to include Arlington and Sandgate and so forth along that line with the title piece in here. And then when we go down through the rest of the policy, what's highlighted in the dark parenthesis part, the darker part, and then in parenthesis are the strikeouts is what we're saying we want to change. So the addition, I'll go down line 23 real quick, is so while everybody's looking at it, to see what it is that you think about it, just highlight what it is. Procedures for classroom library selections. It's on 23 is one of the changes there. The next page over, see here. That is actually all of the changes in terms of the policy. And now you get into the administrative regs so that you guys can just understand what it is that's happening with that one added sentence down here, procedures for the classroom library selection, and the criterias for that, procedures for selection, and the challenging materials. And what I liked about that, in addition to that, was to have a request for a reconsideration of library material documentation to go along with this. This is not normal that we have all of this right here, right now, but this particular case, we have the policy and the recommended administrative regs is going along with that. And those are FYI out there.
Lisa, could you put the policy up, Dina?
I'm trying.
Yep.
My computer is not cooperating.
Okay.
So that's what's out here. So I'll just say with the policy, let's read first what the policy says so that we won't forget that. It says, and I'll go down to after we did the header, and then starting with 8 is that the responsibility of the library material selection lie with the library medium specialist, and in parenthesis endorsement number 61, school librarians, subject to approval of the superintendent. So that's the big thing that we needed to know here. This is what the policy is. It's named the broad strokes of who's responsible in here for doing certain things. And that's what we want to make sure that as a board that we have that in place. Then we go down procedures for challenging material and a procedure for classroom library selection. That's what we want to happen. Now we're saying to administrators, the group, go out and tell us how you're going to manage that. And they've done that so happily that it's already, we had it in place from way back, so they made some adoptions to it. So I'll entertain some comments on the policy. You have any questions pertaining to the policy? As written, any? None. So, and with the policy as written, I'd like to have a motion, recommendation that we pass this on to the next level for warning.
So moved.
Okay, well, we'll do that. And what you got is a lot of things that the boards need to know that they can read and parents can read out there. And that's what the administrative regs of parents will read all that. Okay,
And you'll clean up this part here, or Lisa will?
the cleanup thing.
Go down.
That's up down below.
Down, down?
Yeah.
Oh, down, like as in the others. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other down.
The other down,
It's
yeah.
on there, it's going, we.
Next page.
Thank you.
The next policy for discussion is dress code. And this one we had out and around and back, and this, what we attempted to do, and I read this several times at different board meetings, that life has changed dramatically in how we live and do things. And so the group met and discussed what it is and how we manage dress code, and provided and I'll read that little section in here from 9 to 16, because that's really what it's all about. And so, and then from that, the administrative regs will be put into place. But SVSU is committed to creating a positive learning environment for all students. That's important. That's the purpose of the SVSU dress code is to promote a body positive environment while respecting the freedom for students to express their individuality. All students shall expect a safe learning environment to feel welcome by upholding standards that foster a secure and equitable community. The purpose of the SVSU dress code is not to marginalization, expression of any group based on race, sex, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religious, cultural observance, household income, body type, size. The bottom line, the SVSU dress code is designed with the focus of teaching and learning in mind. So with that, that includes a lot. And then now we have to make sure that the administrative regs go out and are prepared at the various levels to interpret the appropriate statement that what we want to have in terms of a dress code policy. And that's what's coming. So,
It's a robust committee.
yeah.
So to me, again, this is a philosophy, lovely, absolutely lovely. And it's not actually a code, it's a philosophy. And I agree that we should have something that is designed with focus of teaching and learning, and that will be something that minimizes disruptions and distractions. And as a parent, I want to be able to take my child clothes shopping and say, I think this is appropriate or not appropriate, and so does the school. And I do that with this particular code.
What's wrong with the code? You said that this code up at the top, that the name is what you were saying, something about.
Well, can my child wear a hoodie all day long?
Now we're getting into
I-
the various levels of appropriate. A hoodie in the high school, a hoodie on a field trip,
Sure.
elementary level.
Because it's a code.
That we won't get into in terms of a policy. We just won't go down to that level. Now, if here you got administration and of the school and so forth. If there is a problem with hoodies, recognition, and somebody hiding or doing something that they determine that affects the basis of this policy, and that may be put in administrative regs and parents and everybody notified that, wait a minute, there's a problem with that. And we have to be able to address that for the safety of the kids and the environment.
So it's really
Not
not
to put it
a
in here.
code, so maybe it's just the name, it's not a dress code, but it's a philosophy of dress.
This is gonna be returned and adopted at a board level with the admin regs.
I have no idea.
No, we're going more so we're going right now, our job is to do the policy.
Okay.
Okay, and
I'm
so,
gonna speak from the perspective of a 2C board member. We kicked this back to policy because it doesn't have any bones to it. It doesn't designate when it's supposed to and when it's not supposed to come.
and so we're gonna kick it back to them because what we're trying to say is the policy is the board's responsibility,
But it's gonna get.
not the administrative regs part.
That's
And that's what we keep saying, we're gonna get, the administrators are gonna manage the regs, but we have to put a policy in place first.
But it's not a code then, maybe
So
it's
then
just that.
it's still open for editing at that point, the way I look at it. If it's still not formally adopted with the admin regs, anything is still subject. No.
If the policy can be changed or amended at any point in time, but it's not relying on the presence of administrative regs from the previous policy. That's what I was trying to get everybody to understand.
Yep.
So,
But this one,
and now, well, I want to make sure that the name, whether we, what would you think if it's not dress code? We have, it is a dress code policy.
I just think like what Sandy was saying, if I have two teenagers, if I did a quick search on the dress code to make sure that I was buying them something
It's gonna share my
that
screen.
would pass in the school.
See?
If I read just that part, I would have to go digging further. I wouldn't be able to
That's true.
take that and say, this is, we can buy you this, we can't buy you that based on this, because there's no real, like, you know, in terms of what, yeah, there, and that's what I think is what's confusing for me is the guidelines piece of this, and so I think it's going to be
this
confusing.
creates a policy that's going out for admin regs. Once it all comes back together, it's open to interpretation and editing again.
So
Yes,
Sandy,
no,
you want the
maybe
just
The
the name?
regs are for administrators. You can make a recommendation for
Yep.
administrative regs.
Yep.
And the reason, what you're gonna base your recommendation on is what you're saying here. And you're gonna start at I don't know what level,
Somebody else is
elementary
gonna do the
level.
work?
Well, no, yeah, but I'm saying, I'm trying to make sure you understand how you're gonna do this. We got a policy in place. Now, we're gonna go out and you say, well, I wanna do something, but I don't know what to do because if I bought, I'm trying not to get into specifics of certain kind of things. You use the word hoodie. If there is a problem with that at the elementary level or the high school level, the administrators will dress that dress piece in terms of an administrative regs and say, wait a minute, for the safety of the school and the environment that we in and what it represents, we got to do something. And we're going to make that everybody know that and make an amendment in our administrative regs, and it's appropriate. So I'm protecting everybody's rights according to the statement up here.
And-
That's what needs to happen.
And when we discuss this at the elementary level, we recognize that at the middle school, there's one principal. At high school, there's one principal. At the elementary level, there are many principals. And we wanted it to be equitable no matter what school they went to. So that if I decided that hoodies are okay, but Glenn decided they weren't, and we were both principals, that they could go from school to school and have the same rules of
Yeah.
So you got administrators, when I say administrators, I didn't say anything about how many principals they got. We still have administrators are responsible for the administrative regs. That's their job to make sure that this thing is equitable out here. That's part of what it says in there. So again, we want to do something that we shouldn't be doing at that level. I hate to say that because what we're saying is administrators are gonna manage the administrative rigs, and I'm saying where your piece come in at is as a parent that you came up and says, wait a minute, I wanna do this. So go back to the school, or go back to the administrator and say, look, why is it that you have this in the administrative regs and I can't, somebody else, you'll get the answer as to why I said, Rudy, anything else that you want to have, and I don't want to start naming a bunch of other things, but there's a lot of things that was in the dress code that shouldn't be in it, and they changed based on the diversities and things that we have in here, and being able to infringe upon other people's personal space within the learning environment. So it's a lot to it, and you want to be able to walk that line is what you want. They want to do is make sure that whatever they put in there that says you cannot do, that is based on this up here, and they have something to stand behind.
I was just gonna add in, because some of you were here, so this policy came up because the state asked us to update all of our, the whole state had to update our handbooks last year. And so this policy came back to the surface. So this past summer, representatives from all of the administrators sat and worked on the policy, body of the policy language. And then last summer, all of the administrators, all 30 of them, sat and reviewed this. So this language, just so you know, that was part of this. And so the next piece is that subgroup to come back together with representatives from all the different levels to hash out the language, just so you have that piece of the history that was shared.
This is just kind of like the foundation part of it.
Yes, it's all coming, and they are a very active group. It was very timely that it came up last year.
And somebody else could very well pick up on the same thing and says, this runs into this sentence, they'll change it, and then it comes back to us.
Yeah.
Well, again,
That makes a little bit more sense to me.
there's certain words that I didn't want to say when you say come back to us. The board, I'm trying to make sure I'm doing two things here. The board responsibility is the policy. Okay, we put it in place. Now we're saying administrators go out and implement it. It's not required that we act on the administrative regs. It's that what it says, that if we have a problem with issues, we readdress the administrators to manage that issue by maybe changing the language along that line. What the board shouldn't be trying to get into it says, well, I'm going to hold up my policy. I'm going to hold up the board's policy because I want the administrators to do something that's not policy. It's an administrative procedure for that.
Two things for you.
Okay.
There is a policy on administrative regs that does share that it does come back for us to approve as board members. Somewhere there's a policy.
It comes back to, we said we're going to attach it
to this committee.
To the
No.
board. Yeah, so, but I've never seen that
It-
come back.
Oh,
That's
it's one
why.
out here for that, but I don't, it doesn't, the wording should not be approved, administrative regs, because we don't approve of that.
They are
That's
there, but they work for the board.
I understand all of that, but I'm trying to make sure, what I'm trying to get everybody to understand, essentially, what our job is the policy. That's what we are responsible for as a school board member, is developing and putting policy in place. And then we have an administrator from the superintendent down that we relinquish the power over to manage the school. They manage the school based on rules and regulations and guidelines. The policy is one of them. And now we're saying that we have a dress code policy in this particular one here, and we're saying manage the school. Now you're saying, well, a person says, I don't know what to do because I need to have some more information. So the administrators need to make sure they hear that and put that in place and make sure that it meets the criteria of the policy, not an individual but that it serves the purpose of the policy. And that's not easy because everybody wants to have it hit. I want to do this and do that. They have a whole broad scope of interpretation and managing this. And if the issue comes to a level where it needs to be reviewed, it'll come up to them to make a change and send it and say, we made a change to this because of this.
There is a policy on that. So
I know it.
We can pull it back through. And I wanted to share that Laura brought up earlier that maybe instead of dress code, there were other words that we could use that don't say dress code, code being this is what you can wear, this is what you can't, but maybe philosophy of attire, philosophy of dress, but something.
I'm trying to see, how did this come?
This is
How did the
ready to
school
go for
board?
adoption. If we're gonna change it, probably needs to change now.
Yeah, did the school board name it dress code? This, the same one on the school board site for on the dress code. I mean, we're talking about wording that is holding up the things for
that's
that.
right.
The name can be changed as long as we don't change the body of nothing. We can be dressed around or
That's
dressed
what
under, so forth along that line.
Everybody's saying that when the admin regs come back, the body may have to change to be in alignment.
Why?
They'll make their admin regs.
So
Okay.
why don't we just
Okay.
call it the appropriate attire policy, appropriate
Like that.
clothing attire policy?
Still, no matter what we call it, it's gonna get admin regs. That's beyond our scope for the here and now. And then we have an opportunity to review the admin regs before it's adopted in its formality.
Yeah.
No, we're saying it's not an adopted formality. That's what I'm trying to make sure you set. The board is not going to adopt the administrative regs.
They're gonna adopt the policy.
We're going to adopt the policy.
Mm-hmm.
But what if it's flawed?
What?
There could be something that comes out of regs that makes this language unpalatable.
No. It's going to be that procedure made it is unpalatable, not the administrative regs, not the policy. And so you can go back to the administrator and say, wait a minute, how does these procedures reflect that? And if for some reason there is something that we missed by this type up here, they'll bring that up and say, look, I think you guys missed the boat here in terms of what? I want to know what it is that they're going to go out here and come back and tell me in administrative regs after reading this sentence what it is that need to be changed right there. I want to really know. And if it do, we'll change it. But it's not going to be.
Works for me.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to make sure.
So that being said, Leon, and of course Laura, since they started that whole piece last summer, by the fall, they should have something set.
We'll convene the team.
Yeah, so that everybody understands what Laura, I think, nicely is leaving out here. One of the reasons why this also needed to be looked at is that dress code policies tend to very much so in the past be geared towards what young women wore.
Right.
And there was a recognition that that was inappropriate
Right.
and may have been one-sided and may have been misogynistic, sexist, a whole host of things. And so I think your administrators understood that. Your administrators wanted something which went across the spectrum and was also cognizant of not stepping on anybody's First Amendment rights of sometimes kids can wear shirts. And I get asked the question, sometimes kids can wear shirts that some of us don't ever want to see. You know, and so it is a hard spot for them to sort of go through. Your administrative regs are going to be what that balance is. I sent something to Laura, which is typically, you find very short blurbs in student handbooks that talk about, that everybody has to, boys' shorts have to be this, everybody's shorts have to be the same length, right? That kind of thing. So I do think, as Laura said, that they'll focus in and they'll take a look at it. I just wanted to be very clear about why this came up and why this actually has to be addressed in some manner, because I think if you go through and you read the old language, it does strike me as being somewhat sexist.
It was. And a good example of, another example, just to let everybody know, the basketball teams. The boys will pull off their shirt and throw it. Okay? Now, that's, well, and then the girls' team say, well, if the boys can pull their shirt off and throw it, I can pull mine off and throw it. What happened here? We got that covered in this policy now. We didn't have that covered before.
Do we have that in there?
No, we're talking about, no, we can't have those kind of sex things going on.
Yeah.
One is good for one, but not for the other one out here. So that's what was happening in the schools. Just think about it. You said, well, what's wrong with my son pulling off his shirt and sitting on the bench? Well, why can't your daughter pull off the shirt and sit on the bench?
Okay, but the example that Dina gave with that what I might or you might deem as inappropriate, but you're okay with it.
But no, but that's why we have
It
it
might be a
here.
distraction for me, but it may not be a distraction.
So
That's the same thing that we're back to.
But in all of this, and we could talk this through all night.
Yes.
We need admin regs to come to the other boards for them to think about, to then decide if anything, part and parcel comes back to policy.
they're gonna do that part.
Okay.
I'm gonna keep
So let's-
focusing on the policy, getting it out into place. And just let you know, those are
That's what
some
I'm
real,
trying to align with.
yeah,
I'm saying,
that was examples of what we are up against if we start to not realize the whole picture out here for what we say we got in the state.
So, yeah, I mean, so I want to be very clear that you can still have a policy, and your policy isn't going to hit every single, and your administrative regs are not going to hit every single incident. And I can tell you, you'll have a kid who wears something that has something about marijuana usage, and I'll get that question. And the answer about whether or not that's appropriate, or, well, appropriate is always an interesting word, whether or not that's permissible or not under the First Amendment versus having a Confederate flag on your shirt is an interesting and different conversation. That the policy is a reference, I think, to tell your administrators that, hey, maybe we have a problem here, that we need to have a conversation about something that's coming into our school and whether or not it is disrupting our environment. And as somebody says, that it is disrupting. But I think that your policy and your procedures or administrative regs are not always going to answer every single possible thing. I think the drive really here was to remove the sexist language that was really focusing on making assumptions about how young women were dressing.
And I think that's wonderful. I just want it to be easy for our teachers to also follow with, because they are the ones who will have to set the tone or be the first person to decide whether it's in their view appropriate or not appropriate.
And that's the rigs part that you're gonna be seeing.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah, and that's why I just wanna make sure we spend a lot of time on rigs.
Now that we went through the two of these, we get it.
Okay.
We got it.
I
So,
don't
with,
take away from that title. I just.
We-
I started saying my
I
life.
thought the name of if we start to change that, we got dress code down in the body a whole bunch of times, and I don't.
Where
really-
do we have it in the, we have,
In that statement several times in here.
what, let me see.
Everything else is.
It's
Line
right-
3,
line-
line 10,
Or
4. I'm just trying to say that if we're starting to change the name.
We should change it. It should be reflecting that it's either a philosophy or that it's something that it is. It's not really a code, because a code would give us specifics.
So
let's fix it.
So if you want to fix it, what do you think? You're saying somebody have a name out here.
Appropriate clothing attire.
Appropriate or closing attire.
Appropriate clothing attire.
And so I'm just trying to see, did that create, here's I'm gonna hit that statement right quick. Appropriate closing attire. Well, here's what I ran into. the football team dyed their face with black paint and red paint to reflect some organization. Is that appropriate dress attire by name in here? And I'm just saying, this is real. The Vermont Principals Association,
Mhm.
and I just have it, that you cannot do some of these things in here, but if we change the name and you say, well, why is painting my face or wearing certain emblems on my body?
That's gonna be in the admin regs.
Well, that's what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
it's
So,
gonna
but
be
if we
there.
change the name, if we said appropriate clothing, dressing, is that?
So can we say
Included.
philosophy, then philosophy of attire, philosophy of dress?
I'm just trying to make sure you
Yeah.
realize that once we start to spend time on what we think sound good, it's not going to catch in everything that comes up. And so we can change it if you want to, but somebody else will come back and say, hey, you know, if you get, the administrative regs need to say specifically about, and it does, the policy says it out here. So
So
if you
why
want
put the-
appropriate dress requirement, what are you saying? Appropriate, clothing
Clothing
attire.
attire, appropriate clothing attire.
We can say that, but I'm just
What does
giving you the
clothing
example when I said painting the face. What about,
Clothing, maybe it was just a suggestion.
what about the hair? And how they do it and so forth along that line.
Would
So,
that be in the admin regs?
but I'm getting at the name of the title, that if we change it,
It's not a code though.
you know, so you're saying dress, attire, or dress, what? Whatever, I'm just trying to make sure that you realize, and I don't care if you think you want to have appropriate clothing attire, this is the group, and if you think that, we can go on with that.
Do you want to just hold off on this and try to think of something, let it
You
sizzle?
can, you can change the name at any point in time if you think you need to change it, but I just want you to know what you're up against when you start to change certain things.
I want to think of the time, this policy's been out for almost a year now.
Yep.
And we're getting to the part where we're updating handbooks right now. So this would be helpful to our, knowing that expectation, so I'm just.
Can't we just call it dress policy? Is it dress code?
Say that.
Sure, it's great.
Got it.
Okay, that sounds better, it's dress. Okay, well, I can live with that dress.
That way it's not necessarily
Clothing instead of dress or just?
Well, clothing
No,
specifically.
clothing limits.
clothing, and for me, it's the word appropriate, because that could be debated amongst.
Oh, okay.
Do you think that would happen here?
No, I'm saying, between teenagers and parents,
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
administrators, between, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, I think we should probably try to stay away from that word.
Yeah, and that's where you're gonna get into the nuts and bolts of that, and we have it covered here to make sure that whatever comes up, we have something to fall back on legal in the policy for everybody.
And I think this aligns it a little bit more with that, with striking everything else without getting into the actual technical part of it. The policy kind of fits more in line with the whole mission statement part of it,
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, that sounds good. And I think we can move this on to SVSU. Is that correct?
Any place else that says dress code, I will make that
Thank you.
transition. So this is ready to go for adoption.
Yeah, and it'll go on
If
out.
I do that, it's gonna make its next round for adoption.
That would be going on because the title.
And we have enough representation that when the same questions come up from the boards, we can participate in answering as we learned this evening.
Yeah,
Or maybe I'm the newcomer.
No, this is what we have to go through, and this is what, this room should be full of board members.
Now we can zip right through the rest of it.
It should be full of board members. Oh, that's what we need, that's what I spoke about the other night. It's full of board members. I don't know what we're doing at the time here. I didn't say that.
15 minutes.
We've got 15 minutes left.
Yep.
Holy
Yep,
smoke.
that's it.
I think we can get through the next two.
Okay, let's see here. We got, harassment of employees,
Can we do,
4,001.
can we do the bullying one first? Because employee bullying, because that's an easier thing really fast for me.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm
If
advising.
everybody agree, we can do the bullying first there.
Sure.
Okay.
So I'm going to advise you that you don't have the policy at all. What you're talking about there is unprofessional conduct between employees that is dealt with as a personnel and HR matter. You don't need it. It is trying to take what you already have a discrimination policy that covers employees and adults and third-party individuals. Laura will show you what I sent her on the other policy, but the language and the definitions for bullying actually takes it from the statutory definitions of bullying, and the statutory definitions under Title 16 refers solely to student conduct. And so I get why maybe you had this policy at some point. But quite frankly, any of the behavior that is being talked about in the definition section would be handled as a inappropriate, work conduct, unprofessional work conduct, whatever you want to call it. And it would be looked at about whether or not it did in fact have sort of the twinge of having, if the alleged victim was a person who was a member of a protected category, we'd be looking at it for whether or not it was illegal harassment. So in other words, if the alleged victim was either, if it was based on sex, if it was based on disability, if it was based on all of those protected categories. So I started going through this and I was going to make changes to it. And then I realized what I was basically coming down with is you don't need this policy.
So do we have to go through and take it away? Like, do we
If
have
we-
to, as a board, say
You would
that
have to,
we no
you would
longer?
have to
Right.
remove.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you.
saying it, and.
But it would just be literally listed to remove, recommendation to remove.
Thank you.
And the reason, we read into this, what board members in the past were pushing and said, well, we're talking about kids and so forth, but then what about the adults? And that's how we got to this, we couldn't hold it back. We got to that for that reason, so, from way back. So if we, based on the recommendation from legal, is that we would remove policy number 4003 from the, policy requirement from the SVSU. Okay.
Which one do you want to see next? The proposed replacement or the actual harassment policy?
Oh, so can I set this one up as well
Sure,
really
yeah.
quickly? Because I know you guys don't have a lot of time. So I went and started looking at what your actual harassment policy is. And then I'm a fan of if approved, why not, utilize it. So I provided Laura and Lisa with a version that I had another client as part of responding to an Office of Civil Rights matter. And so it's been reviewed by the Office for Civil Rights, so the Federal Office for Civil Rights. And it's a policy that they gave technical assistance to, and it's one that they like. And I kind of thought, why wouldn't we just start with a policy that the federal government that potentially could come in and cause you some difficulty and would want to look at your policy, but it's a policy that they've already approved.
I read through both of them too, and then I said, well, why don't we have this one we have in place here? The one that you were recommended was doing more for me, so I agree.
Yeah, I think my recollection is, Leon, and please don't hold me to this, but I think my recollection is the one that OCR looked at talks more and provides more guidance on if it is an out of part, in the third party issue.
Right. Yep. So what we would want to do here, if the board would like, in terms of, the acceptance of the recommendation of prevention and responsible funding to unlawful harassment of employees and a third party, and keep the name the same as 4001 as a required policy, and the editing of the title in terms of all that to go on there. Would that be the way to go?
What do you think, Dina?
So if you just change the name, you meant, and to what your policy is, and just said, hey, underline what the differences are, is that what, I'm sorry?
Well,
We'd probably send it out, and just say that this is going to replace that policy. I mean, we have done that in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they have to warn and adopt it.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is, what do we do for a title? Do we just keep the harassment of employees title and then say we're going to replace it with this?
well, this, you put employee and unlawful harassment
Of employees and third parties, because that is the extension of what the policy is covering, is the third parties.
It's the third party.
Okay, so
It seems to me that I would say that I think what you're giving the boards, and if and I can talk to Laura about how, if Laura or Jim, whoever is going to sort of introduce it, or you, Leon, we could talk sort of offline, but I could give you a paragraph of, here's why, and it's a more expansive policy, and here's why we think it's better, or it's more. Let me not say better. Let me be polite and say that it's more timely.
Yeah.
Right, and I would keep it with the third parties identified. So it is a more expansive policy. I think it's a policy, by the way, that clarifies an obligation that you already have to third parties.
Right. I like the idea of, I mean, what we wanted, what Lisa was talking about, going out to the board, we would be telling them that here's what we have and here's what we're recommending.
Yep.
To replace that with. Okay. And at that point, and here's the reason why. So if you had some additional language that you wanted to send just to speak to that.
Right. I mean, I can give you a really probably straightforward, easy one, unfortunately, that has come up. Say you have a basketball game and I'm in the stands and somebody decides to say something about what they perceive as my my gender or sexual preference or something along those lines, right? And the VPA has standards, and I think that as a school district, you all have standards about what's appropriate, and Vermont has laws about what can be said too, and how behavior can be. And so this policy would cover it and make sure that it was understood that if I'm sitting in your stands, that I have a right to not face illegal harassment that can be controlled, right? So.
Right. All right.
But yeah, I can give you a paragraph, Leon, if that's what you all from the policy committee are good with going with this one. I can give you sort of a paragraph of, here's
If you
my.
did that, does that make it look like the rest of the policies, and then the rest of this becomes the regs?
No.
No, I think I kept it all as a policy.
The policy.
And so
put the header and stuff on because
Thank you.
because I wasn't sure if it was going to go anywhere. So that will be all the names, everything, all the good stuff will be there.
So what we'll do is do just that, if that's what the board desires. We're gonna recommend to accept the the new version, but more in-depth, uh, coverage of, and inclusion of the third party. I read that as well along that line, because it's a real thing, it's timely, and it's happening right now.
So it's 4001, so it's still the same 4001, it's just a, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I keep,
You're gonna make it look
Not-
like the rest of them?
yeah. But that's not where I'm going.
A wording at the top.
I'm
of the
talking,
title.
I'm thinking about the title. So we're gonna probably end up changing at least the title to say harassment of employees and third parties. Yes, no, Dina?
Yes, that's what we were saying.
Yeah, yeah, I'll send you something, Lisa, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Mhm.
Yep.
Great. That's all I need to know. So we are going to start sending this around for?
Yes, I think we'll need to go ahead and start sending this around. And move on.
Okay.
All right.
So somebody said that would be, that was 7. And I mean, this was what we took out of order 6. So what's on here left then after this is FYI. And again, what you're looking at is screening, and it says administrative regs update. They in here for you to read and so forth. And it says FYI, and there's an anaphylaxis administrative regs that's updated, and they in here for you to read and understand. The tracking sheet is out, and that sheet tracks where our policies all are in relation to the boards, because we got many different timetables in which different boards are accepting and holding and rejecting and sending information and so forth. So we use the tracking sheet to help everybody understand where they all are. The next thing that we have on here is others, and these are the policies in that we have looking at handled in the future out here, and these are future considerations, and I've read through those. One of the ones like the school board association and is going through the wilderness policy, and so we have the group here that are meeting
Thursday
this week, and they have a big book that talks about nutrition and so forth, because this policy is going to change, and so we're already starting to look at what it is that may need to be changed in the student nutrition and wellness policy, and provide input back before the policy becomes the recommended policy out there. So the field trip one was on there because there was a bunch of questions asked about field trip types of things in the past, and that'll come up. Then we have the 2 alcohol and drug for workplace and possession. The reason I was going through those people, how do we get policies up? But this starts our agenda. So if you as board members decide that let me start to read through a bunch of the policies, or know that there's information that's being questioned about certain things, and you look at the policy and say, well, I think we need to get this on our list so as a board we can review this and make sure we hear what it is that the concerns are, and if we need to modify our policies, we'll be formalizing it in that manner. And it comes from the public, it comes from administrators, it comes from board members. All that's the entry level in to create an agenda so we can work on. Okay, so now you better understand how that flows now for us to do that. So we want to keep a bunch of policies coming down for consideration, because we are looking for things that we need to do. Some of them, the Vermont School Board Association says we need to review our policy every so often out here. And then because of how many we got, we have to divide them up. And I think it says a third or fifth a year or something along that line to try to keep them current and so forth. And that we go out and try to pull that in. But the time it takes for us to go through all of these policies, and you can see in an hour and a half here, in the number of times meeting once a month, we can't get through all of the policies that we have. And this, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 particular policies, have an in-depth discussion about that. So if you did that 6 times 12 and so forth, you're not, and if we got that far, you're not gonna get half of the policies we got done. So that's why I said this board can be as big as we want it to be from other boards. We can start different things, divide up the number of policies and say, okay, well, why don't we have this group start to work on this group over here and come back and that group work on some, back, and we can have probably 18 out there. And that, so when it gets to this point, we can just move along pretty fast. I just throw a number out there along that line. Saying 18, but Lisa said, no. So, with that in mind, I think that it would be best that we end, like we said, we're supposed to end our time limit. I don't know what.
We're all just a hair over.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
You're good.
And so, at this time, I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Nobody objects of having a motion. I really appreciate the conversation. Thanks to you for coming.
Yep, not a problem.
Thanks.
Thank you guys.